Hi guys, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, and I'm here to give my 1991 character retrospective of Joe Haskell. You guys know I've been going through the 1991 revival, doing character retrospectives, sort of looking at the original characters, well, the reboot characters, and comparing them to their original counterpart. What was the similarities? What was the differences? I think again, and this is my opinion, there isn't. I know it feels like there's a night and day difference between Michael T. Weiss's Joe Haskell and the late Joel Carruthers Haskell. I, I, I don't get that sense of a difference. Now, who was more rugged? I mean, sure, you could give that edge to Michael T. Weiss, but there were times when Joel Carruthers, though he was usually smooth babyface, he could appear rugged. He could appear where remember he got drunk over, Carolyn keeps standing him up, and finally he stood up to Liz because he was half drunk. Now, it didn't always take liquor for him to stand up for people. I think the biggest similarities is Joel Carruthers and Michael T. Weiss's Joe Haskell weren't afraid to get into fights at the drop of a hat. Look in the original when Joel Carruthers as Joe Haskell is ready to fight those men who were dancing with Carolyn. Look when he punches Burke Devlin in his hotel room. I mean, he's not afraid of Burke. He's not afraid to get into a fist fight. I think that's maybe a bit of a misconception with the original Joe Haskell. Many people just think, oh, Joe took a lot of shit. No, I think Joe just tried to not instigate a fight, but show I'm not going to back down from one either. And there's a big difference between the two. Hey, if you're going to hit on my girlfriend, hey, there's going to be an issue. If you're going to, continue to make moves on her, there's really going to be an issue. And I sort of get that same sense from Michael T. Weiss. Now, for Michael T. Weiss's Joe Haskell, I just think that where Michael T. Weiss's Joe Haskell is concerned, you want to look at the biggest differences. It didn't take Michael T. Weiss's character getting drunk to confront any member of the Collins family. That's what I would say the biggest difference is. And the real big difference is too is, and you got to remember in the 1991 revival, there's no Burke Devlin, and I do think at times, in my opinion, Michael T. Weiss's Joe Haskell is a bit Burke Devlin-ish at times. I'm not saying he completely is. He's not a businessman, mind you. They're both Joel Carruthers Joe Haskell and Michael T. Weiss's Joe Haskell. They're both fishermen. They're both from Collinsport, Maine. I would, if I had to point my finger and say which one was sort of more reliant on the Collins family, sort of having their back, I would definitely give that edge to Joel Carruthers as Joe Haskell and not so much Michael T. Weiss's, because Michael T. Weiss's Joe Haskell was more his sort of his own sailor. I'm not saying he didn't dock his ship where the Collins family docked theirs, but at the same time, he wasn't so reliant on their business of, hey, just because you have the biggest fishing fleet doesn't mean I don't matter. And I think that's really one of the bigger differences too, and I'll get into the other one here in a moment, is the original, Joe Haskell had a very simple dream. Be a sailor, become captain of his own ship, and get married to Carolyn. And not because of Carolyn, Carolyn Collins' daughter, played by Nancy Barrett in the original. And keep in mind, this wasn't about money for young Joe. This was about, I just want to marry the girl of my dreams and live happily ever after. It's very, Joe Haskell, at times, Joel Carruthers, Joe Haskell is a very fairy tale character in many ways. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a knock. It's not me trying to play Monday morning quarterback, and I don't want people to think it is. But he is very much trying to, he's not trying to live a fairy tale life, but he wants that fairy tale life. But I'd say the biggest difference is where people might get misconceived. He's willing to work for it. He's not. This isn't Nathan. This isn't Nathan Forbes where he just, yeah, I'm gonna marry because I want this girl's money. No, this is Joe Haskell who's willing to be a sailor, work, become a captain. He works at the cannery. He works for the Collinses family. Now, we all know in the original, Carolyn does not love Joe back. Carolyn does not really want to marry Joe. And she actually becomes more, flirty and interested in Burke Devlin, and we know where that leads. With the 1991 Joe Haskell, there actually is a bigger and better relationship with Carolyn. They're obviously intimate with each other, very intimate, and I like that. I think if the 1991 revival slash reboot, I've said it, it is that. It's a reboot. They're telling you a different story with these characters by giving them this fresh coat of paint. And this is sort of, you might say it's not that big of a gloss over, but when you really watch the original, to me it is. If you disagree, please do. It, I mean, look, Barbara Blackburn and Joel Carruthers, or sorry, Joel, Michael T. Weiss, sorry, my apologies. Michael T. Weiss and Barbara Blackburn, man, were they great together in those scenes. They were just, you could tell that you didn't have to convince me that they were a couple. Where you could sort of see Carolyn in the original Nancy Barrett, you could sort of sense there was a hesitancy of being with Joe at times. I'm not saying she didn't care for Joe as a friend, she did, but she did not want to marry Joe. Whereas in the revival, if they would have got hitched like the next day, you wouldn't have been shocked, you know. But obviously, Ben Cross's Barnabas Collins comes into the picture and things change. Barbara Blackburn's character's mood changes. And so, really, where now you could look at the original and sort of point to Maggie Evans, and you could, but I would say the biggest difference is, remember, Barbara Blackburn's Carolyn, Michael T. Weiss's Carolyn, sorry, Michael T. Weiss's Joe Haskell's Carolyn, I'll get this right, doesn't, Carolyn doesn't get kidnapped the way Maggie got kidnapped in the original. She gets bit, obviously. Gets, but at the same time, this is sort of where you get Michael T. Weiss. I've said the most shocking thing about the revival to me was Joe Haskell's death, because, and this is a real big difference. You might say, well, what happened with the original Joe Haskell? And I'll get into that here in a second. Michael T. Weiss's Joe Haskell actually gets killed off. I think that's where, and I'm not saying they should have let him stake Barnabas by no means, but it still shocks me. Where Bill Malloy's death shocks you, Joe Haskell's death does this times 12 in the revival, because something's going to happen to him, but when I go back and watch the revival, I for whatever reason, I know he's going to die, but I don't think I always seem to think, well, maybe he's just going to get knocked unconscious, or, maybe Angelique in another body's just going to perform some sort of spell to make him forget and say no. But really, I sort of keep looking at this like they're going to pull some sort of spell out. And no, I think that's where the revival really shocked me most. They have, with the revival characters, especially Angelique's character, she had no problem resorting to cold-blooded murder. Look, in the revival, I've said this, she tries to kill Barnabas with that knife, and that Barnabas and her struggling with that knife is what causes her death ultimately. Barnabas more kills her in self-defense than, cold-blooded murder. than anything else. With the revival that she literally she's in Barbara Still's body, Dr. Julie Hoffman, and we get the death of Joe Haskell. She stabs him, she kills him, and it really shakes me when this happens because it's so shocking. I'm not saying, I guess when you watch the original, you should say, well, they killed people who found out secrets, which is true. My buddy Mark Gilman, has pointed that out several times, and it's true. If you know a secret in Dark Shadows, generally you're not going to be around. But I think it's not just when they do this, it's who they do it to. It's Joe Haskell, and no, it might not be Joel Carruthers Joe Haskell. It's still Joe Haskell. it's it's a really it's a main character death you don't see coming, and you don't. This to me is where I would give when you compare sort of the beginning episodes of the original and you look at the 13 episodes, or the episodes of the revival. I gotta give the edge to the revival a bit for shocking death, because again, when you look at the original, what happened with the original Joe Haskell, and again, I'll get into that. I was not suspecting Joe to get killed. Again, when I'd say that's one of the bigger differences with the revival than the original. The revival dealt with consequences a little differently than the original did. And again, you could say it was made in a different time, and I wouldn't disagree with that. It was, but they did not hesitate to have a heel like Angelique just commit murder. That's really, to me, murder's one again is the worst crime you could commit. Cold-blooded murder, no less. And that's what it is. She doesn't want Barnabas to be free from his curse, which is understandable, but at the same time, instead of just knocking him unconscious or giving him no, she just nope, you're dead. You wanna fuck up my spell? Pardon the language, but that's you're gonna die. And whether he realizes that or not is inconsequential to her. She doesn't care about anybody but herself. And again, I love that. I love that about the revival too. It really brings out the old school logic of Laura Parker's Angelique, where she just cared about herself. But they sort of do it times 12 here when they have her kill Joe Haskell, because she's killing somebody in cold blood. Just this isn't. Remember when Angelique puts the curse on Barnabas and Sarah dies, and we're like, how could you do this? That to me is cold blooded right there. That's the cold blooded murder of the spell. But killing somebody in the back is just as cold blooded as casting that curse. It's really like, holy shit, she just murdered somebody. And it's so good. It's just shocking. Now, I'm sorry if I'm rambling. So what happened to the original Joe Haskell, played by Joel Carruthers? Obviously, I've sort of given this away because obviously they don't kill him off, and they don't. Now they write him off a lot differently than Michael T. Weiss's character. He gets committed to Wincliffe Sanitarium, and it's really interesting because remember, I've sort of talked about how Maggie Evans in the original series, Joe Haskell ended up in a relationship with Maggie Evans, and they were engaged to be married and stuff. And Angelique, who had been turned into a vampire by Nicholas Blair and Diablos, sort of at that point, Laura Parker is playing a vampire, very, very beautiful vampire. And she bites Joe Haskell, seduces him, and this sort of, between the vampire and then the werewolf, Chris Jennings showing up, and it drives Joe insane. Joe literally goes insane. Or they drive him to the point of insanity where they just commit him. They commit him to Wincliffe to sort of cover, more so cover Chris's tracks, because again they're hanging on to Chris Jennings, or keeping Chris Jennings, and why wouldn't they? He's a more interesting character than Joe Haskell at this point. Joe is sort of, I mean, where is there left for you to take Joe at this point? I think, and I do think they could have brought him back later. Sure, they don't, obviously, which sucked. You know, again, I think that's a character, though they'd have to recast today, would be really interesting in the new series. Like, what would you want to talk about? Somebody, does he actually finally remember everything that happened, truly happened, and just keeps it to himself and comes back for revenge, or does he let it go like he used to? What would have happened? And that's a really interesting, concept of it. Of here's Joel Carruthers as Joe Haskell. Obviously, he'd have to be played by somebody else. And here's somebody who was wrong. Look, we all know he was wrongfully committed. He wasn't insane. He did see a werewolf. He did see a vampire. But again, secrets were held dear in Dark Shadows. Secrets were taken to the grave, sometimes quite literally. Bill Malloy is an example. Dr. Peter Guthrie is an example of that. There's many examples where, again, if you knew a secret in Dark Shadows, if you knew a secret in that town, and you tried to find out a secret, more or less a big secret, you were deader than Ted Hollister on the streets of Haddonfield. Shout out to Ryan Bowers and Darnell Weeks for that one. And I think that's really, again, the revival remains true to that. That's something the revival doesn't get enough credit for, where, again, or I keep saying Joel Carruthers, sorry. Michael T. Weiss as Joe Haskell is trying to find out a big secret, and he goes down into the basement, and what happens? He gets, the coffin of Barnabas Collins. You're dead. You're done for. I love that they don't pull back here. I love stories that do not pull their punches. Again, I've talked about my favorite Western is Once Upon a Time in the West, because they make no effort to pull their punches. They make Henry Fonda's a heel, he's a heel all the way. They make no effort to pull back. And I love that. If you're going to have somebody be a heel, be a cold-blooded heel, have them be that. And Angelique in the 1991 revival is that, because she just murders Joe Haskell. I keep almost saying Joel Carruthers, and it's not hard. And they do. They go all the way on Joe's death. I mean, they don't pull back. They don't second guess themselves. Look, you could say it's only one season, and true it is, but it's still impressive what they do with it. It's still a risk. I mean, because think about it. If you have a season 2, well, now he's gone. Now Joe Haskell's gone. There's no Joe Haskell. And how do you sort of answer that now? Well, they they had that answer. Hide the body to the shallow grave. Just hide the body. Oh my God. No one knows what happened to poor old Joe. He's dead. His character got killed off in the revival. Amazing though. I just look. I've talked about secrets with Collinsport, and how, again, if you found out a secret, or if you were on the verge of finding something out, you were most likely gone. You were going to get wrote off, killed, or just sent away. And the original Dark Shadows didn't pull their punches a lot of times either. They weren't afraid to kill somebody off. But I think the way it got done in the revival was just so shocking and cold-blooded. I mean, look, Bill Malloy's death was somewhat accidental, but Matthew Morgan still did it. I would say Peter Guthrie's death is definitely one of the most cold-blooded deaths in the series, in the original. But when I look at the revival, man, I see Joe come, like, how are they going to do this? When I go back and watch this, I keep going, man, I know they're going to kill him, but it's like I'm waiting for like something to happen where he gets knocked unconscious. Nope, he's done. He's done for. And I really appreciate that as a viewer because it's shocking and a fan. It's again, in the original, Joe Haskell did not get killed off. He got rode off another way. And, to stay true to their freshness, to their fresh coat of paint, and I'm sorry if this is going too long, they go, you know what? We're killing him off. And I can't disagree with their decision. It's really smart and it's clever. They don't, I don't think they hesitated at all. And I got to give them credit for pulling this one, for sort of going, you know what, we're going to roll the dice and kill Joe Haskell, something we didn't do in the original series. And they deserve a lot of credit for that. In the 1991 revival, they did kill Joe Haskell. They did not pull their punches there. And generally with Collinsport, again, I've said, when somebody tries to find out a secret, usually they get rid of you. All right, guys, you have a great Monday, or great Monday morning. Happy Michael Myers Monday to everybody. You guys have a great, great Monday.